Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. You know, in a world that's just absolutely overflowing with information, sometimes it feels like a full-time job just figuring out what actually matters.
Right. It's overwhelming.
Exactly. And that's why we're here to kind of cut through all that noise, pull out the really crucial bits of knowledge so you're well informed, but hopefully without feeling buried.
hmm
Today, we're going to plunge into some really foundational research, stuff that should resonate pretty deeply if you're interested in the physics of hunting, especially, for bow hunters.
Yeah, this is good stuff.
We're talking about Dr. Ed Ashby's 2008 study update, part 4, and this isn't just like academic theory sitting on a shelf.
Not at all.
This is rigorous, hands-on testing straight from the field, and it really challenges some common beliefs about arrow performance.
It really does. Our mission today really is to pull out the most impactful insights from this study, make them super clear, actionable.
Right.
Whether you're, a novice just starting out, maybe picking up your first bow and thinking, what arrow do I even use?
Yeah, totally confusing at first.
Or, maybe you're a seasoned veteran just looking to fine-tune your setup, really dial it in. We're going to unpack what truly dictates arrow penetration and, well, ultimately successful and ethical hunting. It's all about real-world effectiveness.
And honestly, some of these findings might genuinely surprise you. Like, did you know the exact same arrow could be perfectly tuned to wildly different bows?
Yeah, that one's wild.
Even ones with, significantly different draw weights. Or that maybe what many of us were taught is the most important factor in penetration might actually be, well, kind of misleading.
A red herring.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's just get right to it.
Let's do it.
So let's start with what Dr. Ashby identified as this really critical baseline,
Right.
the heavy bone threshold.
Okay.
His extensive testing, really extensive, showed that for an arrow to reliably punch through heavy bone, its mass needs to be very near 650 grains.
Right. And for context, 650 grains, that's roughly, what, a tenth of a pound? Sounds small, but for an arrow, that's significant weight.
Exactly. It's substantial. And this 650 grain mark, it isn't just a suggestion. It's like a proven minimum for getting that predictable heavy bone penetration. But here's what's really fascinating and maybe seems a bit counterintuitive. This threshold is little affected by changes in the arrow's overall force or its front of center FOC.
Right. That's a really crucial distinction to make early on. FOC, front of center, basically just describes how much of the arrow's weight is biased towards the front, towards the tip.
Like being nose heavy.
Exactly. A high FOC arrow is very nose heavy. And the study uses the term ultra EFOs, that's extreme front of center for arrows with, well, an extreme amount of weight up front.
Gotcha.
So while breaching that heavy bone initially, yeah, that's mostly about hitting that 650 grain mass threshold.
Right.
But what happens after the bone is breached, that's where FOC suddenly becomes really important. The research clearly shows once that bone gives way, the degree of FOC becomes a very important factor in determining how much penetration happens after the breach.
Oh.
It's like, mass gets you through the door, but FOC determines how far into the room you go.
That actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it that way. Like, imagine throwing a dart, right? If it's perfectly balanced, maybe it sticks in the board, but it just kind of stocks there.
Yeah.
Now picture one of those pro darts. Super heavy at the tip, it hits, punches through, and just keeps driving in, right?
Exactly. That nose-heavy design gives it that powerful follow-through. It keeps the back end from sort of wanting to kick out and slow things down.
That's the ultra EFOC effect for post-breaching penetration.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the conditions Ashby was testing under were pretty unique back in 2008.
Yeah, they really were.
He was doing this testing way out in Australia's Northern Territory, remote place. And apparently he had pretty limited components available, which meant he had to get, well, incredibly creative to build this just above threshold ultra EFOC arrow he wanted to test.
It's amazing what constraints can lead to sometimes. This limitation actually resulted in some really insightful experiments.
I can just picture trying to bear shaft tune out there with limited gear. It must have been something.
Oh, absolutely. It really speaks to the ingenuity involved. The specific setup he landed on, this slightly above threshold ultra EFOC arrow, was quite remarkable given those limitations.
So what did it look like?
Okay, so it used a 7595 Gold Pip Expedition Hunter shaft. Pretty standard, durable carbon shaft back then.
Okay.
But the real key was stacking weight up front. He used a 100-grain brass insert,
Right.
then a 125-grain steel adapter screwed into that,
Yeah, okay.
and then a 190-grain grizzly broadhead on top of that. So serious front loading.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight up front.
For fletching, he went small. A 2.5-inch A&A4 fletch set at 7,805 degrees. And there's this other unique component integral to the design, the turbulator.
Turbulator, what's that?
It's basically an elevated red band, just a 1/4 inch in front of the fletching. Think of it like a tiny fin designed to create a little bit of controlled air turbulence right at the back.
Ah, to help it stabilize.
Exactly. Help the arrow fly straighter, especially with that heavy broadhead. So all that together, the final specs were arrow mass, 655 grains just over that threshold, FOC, a whopping 31.4%, definitely ultra EFOC.
Okay.
Impact momentum was calculated at 0.474 slug-feet second, and the impact kinetic energy was 38.64 foot-pounds.
Now, here's the part that just blows my mind, really. For anyone who's, spent hours tearing their hair out trying to tune an arrow to just one bow.
Oh, I know that pain.
Right. Ashby managed to bare shaft tune this exact same arrow to 2 completely different bows.
Yep.
It tuned perfectly to an 82-pound longbow and a 64-pound drawn to 27 inches ACS-CX recurve. I mean, how? How is that even possible?
It sounds impossible, right? But it's a fantastic piece of insight from the study, and it really boils down to bow geometry. So the 82-pound longbow he used, it was built very far from center shot, meaning the sight window where the arrow rests was cut almost a 1/4 inch short of the bow's actual center line.
Ah, okay, so the arrow sits further out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that kind of design inherently requires a weaker spined arrow, a more flexible one to tune properly compared to a center shot bow.
Right, because it has to flex around the riser more.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that with the ACS-CX recurve.
Yeah.
That one was cut to the center line,
Okay.
which means it inherently needs a stiffer spine, a less flexible arrow to tune correctly, because it doesn't need to bend around the riser as much.
Gotcha.
So you have this fundamental difference in the bow's geometry, combined with the fact that the ACS-CX is just a higher performance bow design. And it allowed Dr. Ashby to make that same arrow work for both, just by tinkering with the thickness of the arrow plate, basically adjusting how far the arrow sat from the riser side plate on each bow.
Wow, that's a masterclass in tuning right there. It really shows how much the bow itself influences things, not just the draw weight.
Absolutely. It's not just about pounds.
And, okay, if that wasn't enough of a surprise, despite these really different bows, different draw weights, the study found the arrow velocity from both bows turned out to be identical when they put it through a chronograph.
Yeah, blew me away too.
Yeah.
You'd absolutely expect the 82-pound bow to shoot it faster.
Right. But somehow, the way it tuned, the efficiency, it balanced out perfectly.
It's quite something. And this specific arrow setup, this Ultra EFOC arrow with the small fletching, it offered other benefits the study highlighted too.
Like what?
Well, that small 2.5-inch 4-fletch setup, even with a less than perfect finger release, which can introduce wobble, it still easily stabilized that heavy 190-grain grizzly broadhead.
Okay.
The point is, the higher your FOC, the less fletching you actually need to keep the arrow flying straight.
Ah, makes sense. The weight up front is already doing a lot of the steering work.
Exactly. And smaller fletching means less weight on the back of the shaft, which actually increases your FOC even more. It's a positive feedback loop. Plus, less fletching means less drag in the air.
Yeah.
That means the arrow holds onto its energy better downrange.
Flatter trajectory.
Flatter trajectory, yep. Less drift in crosswinds, which is huge.
Yeah.
And noticeably quieter flight, too. It's just a whole cascade of benefits, all tied into making the arrow more efficient.
Okay, this is fascinating stuff. But let's get to the pointy end of the spear, so to speak, the real-world results. Because that's what really matters for ethical hunting, right?
Absolutely. The proof is in the pudding, or in this case, the buffalo.
Right. So Dr. Ashby tested these setups on Asian buffalo bulls. And these aren't small animals. We're talking notoriously tough, very large adult trophy class bulls. So the data is incredibly robust.
Yeah, you couldn't ask for a tougher test medium, really.
He took 12 shots in total, all broadside, all at 20 yards, consistent setup, 6 shots with the 82-pound longbow, 6 with the 64-pound ACS-CX. And because, as we just discussed, the arrow velocity and, crucially, the performance turned out to be identical between the bows, they just grouped all 12 shots together for the analysis. Makes sense.
Yeah, the bow became irrelevant once the arrow specs are identical. So out of those 12 shots, 2 were deliberate shoulder shots. He was specifically testing the arrow's ability to break heavy bone and penetrate deep muscle.
Okay, the hard stuff.
Exactly. With the 82-pound longbow, one arrow hit mid-shoulder on what was described as an oversized trophy bull. Big animal.
Yeah.
It penetrated the scapula, that's the shoulder blade. Very dense bone, went through several inches of heavy shoulder muscle. and finally stopped in the onside rib. Penetration depth, 11.25 inches.
Wow, through a scapula and muscle.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Very. The other shoulder shot, this one from the 64-pound ACSCX, hit very low. It struck the center of the folded elbow joint on another very large adult bull.
Oof, that's a tough joint.
Incredibly tough.
Yeah?
This arrow penetrated the elbow joint itself, then punched through the onside rib behind it, passed clean through the lower part of the heart,
Whoa.
and finally stopped lodged in the offside rib. The penetration through the thorax, so not counting the elbow joint it broke first, was 10.5 inches.
Man, those are serious results on really difficult hits.
Absolutely demonstrates the capability on hard targets.
Okay, so what about the other 10 shots, the ones aimed more for the vital thorax area?
Right, the more typical target zone. So of the 10 thorax impacts, one shot, which happened to be from the 64-pound bow, hit quite high and actually struck the spine.
Ouch.
Yeah, it totally buried the broadhead, severed the spinal cord. Penetration there was 10.375 inches, instant incapacitation, obviously.
Right.
The remaining 9 shots, these were all well-placed, right in the lower third of the chest, textbook vital long shots.
Perfect.
And crucially, every single one of these 9 arrows penetrated the entrance rib, fully traversed the entire width of the thorax, pierced both lungs, and stuck solidly into the offside rib.
Into it, but not through it.
Correct. None of these 9 actually exited the offside rib. They hit it and stopped. The average penetration for these 9 well-placed shots was 17.55 inches. The median, which kind of smooths out any outliers, was 16.50 inches.
16, 17 inches of penetration through the chest cavity of an Asian buffalo. That gives you a really clear picture of what this just above threshold 31% FOC arrow could reliably do, even on massive, tough animals.
Exactly. Consistent, deep, lethal penetration.
So, okay, pulling back a bit, what does all this very specific, very concrete data mean for the bigger picture? Especially when you start comparing these results to maybe, later arrows or different setups. And what about the elephant in the room for many bow hunters? Kinetic energy, that number everyone seems to chase.
Right. This is where the study really starts, let's say, poking holes in some long-held beliefs. Dr. Ashby includes graphs 17 and 18 specifically for this. They visually map out the relationship between average post-breaching penetration.
Okay, after breaking bone.
Right, versus impact momentum and versus impact kinetic energy. And he compares this 655-grain Ultra EFC arrow against lighter arrows that were below that 650-grain threshold.
What were those lighter ones?
There was a 620-grain setup with 25.3% FOC and a 643-grain setup with only 15.6% FOC.
Yeah.
So one slightly lighter with decent FOC, one very close in weight but much lower FOC.
Gotcha.
And what jumps out immediately is that even though we're only talking about a mere 35 grains, difference in total weight between the lightest and heaviest.
Tiny difference.
And the shaft diameter difference was minuscule, like 0.021 inches smaller for the Ultra EFOC arrow. Despite those small differences, the 655-grain Ultra EFOC arrows showed an abrupt increase in the heavy bone penetration rate and a marked increase in post-breaching penetration.
So crossing that 650-grain threshold made a big difference, and the high FOC helped after the breach.
Precisely. And the trend was crystal clear across each and every assessment in the study. As the degree of arrow FOC increases, the amount of post-breaching penetration also increases, and by a significant degree. It wasn't subtle. Higher FOC meant substantially more penetration after breaking through bone or tough tissue.
It's not just hitting hard, it's hitting smart, with that weight forward driving it through.
You nailed it.
And, okay, to really hammer this point home, you mentioned graph 18. The study explicitly includes that one, and Ashby even says it's, quote, in deference to any who still believe that an arrow's kinetic energy somehow indicates the arrow's penetration potential.
Yeah, he's pretty direct there. He's basically saying, okay, if you still think KE is the magic number, look at this graph and explain these results.
He's directly challenging that KE obsession.
Absolutely. And he uses these really sharp rhetorical questions based on the data to highlight why KE by itself is a flawed predictor.
Like what kind of questions?
Well, things like, if KE alone predicts penetration, why do arrows with near identical external dimensions and near equal impact kinetic energy show vastly different penetration results in the real world, which they did in his tests?
Good question.
And why did one set up the 643-grain arrow, which actually had slightly lower impact KE than the 620-grain one, remember, only 23 grains mass difference, why did that one show a 42% increase in average penetration compared to the 620-grain? Less KE, way more penetration. How does that work if KE is king?
Yeah, that doesn't compute if you only look at KE.
Exactly. And maybe the biggest one. Why did the above-threshold 655-grain arrow, which had only marginally more impact KE than the others, show a 24.2% penetration increase over the 620-grain arrow and just an enormous 88.4% increase over the 643-grain arrow? The tiny KE difference can't explain that huge jump in penetration.
Right. The data just doesn't line up with KE being the primary driver.
Not at all. It's a factor, obviously, energy is involved, but it's not the predictor people often treat it as.
So what is a better predictor, according to Ashby's work?
Momentum. And he's been consistent on this across his previous updates, too, going back to 2004 and 2007. He clarifies that momentum does show a positive correlation with outcome penetration. It demonstrates, quote, relevancy when all the other arrow factors are kept the same.
Okay, so momentum tracks better.
Yes. Think of momentum measured in slug feet per second as the arrow's persistence, its ability to keep pushing forward after impact. And he found something really specific and quantifiable.
What was that?
He found that, quote, if you increase the impact force, momentum, of a given arrow by 20%, the average penetration into fresh, real tissues shows an increase of 20%. It's a direct one-to-one relationship.
Okay. Increase momentum by X%, get X% more penetration, basically?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Holding other factors constant. Now, contrast that directly with kinetic energy. He found, quote, if you increase the impact kinetic energy of a given arrow by 20%, the average penetration in real tissues does not show an increase of 20%.
Right.
It shows a percentage increase that equals the percent of change in the arrow's impact momentum.
Whoa, okay. So even if you boost KE, the penetration only goes up by the amount the momentum increased, not the amount the KE increased.
Exactly. So momentum is the factor that directly correlates with the actual depth of penetration you're likely to see in real-world tissues. KE is kind of secondary to that relationship.
That is a really profound distinction, and it totally shifts the focus, doesn't it?
It really should.
So the critical insight, boiling it all down, seems to be this quote from the study. Every single feature of the arrow's design has a penetration effect. The degree of arrow FOC is no exception. Indeed, it is proving to be a very significant soft tissue and post-breaching penetration factor.
That sums it perfectly. It's not about finding one magic bullet number like KE. It's about understanding how the entire system, mass, FOC, broadhead design, tuning, momentum, all work together.
This understanding, then, it leads us straight into challenging some really common questions or maybe common assumptions in bow hunting.
For sure.
The study makes it pretty clear why asking how much kinetic energy do I need to hunt a deer or whatever animal, why that's, in Ashby's words, the most invalid question in bow hunting.
Because it's meaningless without context.
Right. It's unanswerable. You can't know without knowing the specific arrow, its weight, its FOC, its broadhead, how it's tuned, how all those features actually perform when they hit something real.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if you get a bit more specific, like asking, okay, this is my arrow setup. Is my arrow force, my momentum, or KE adequate? Even that, Ashby argues, is still not the right question.
Why not? That sounds better.
It's better, but it still doesn't account for the conditions of the hit. It often assumes a perfect broadside shot into the ribs.
Ah, the best case scenario.
Right. And relying only on what's needed for the perfectly placed shot, well, that's just not sufficient preparation for real-world hunting, where things go wrong, variables happen, animals turn, shoulders get hit, angles change.
Yeah, Murphy's Law is definitely a factor in the field.
Always. So planning only for perfection isn't really planning for success.
So what is the right question, according to Ashby? The one bow hunters should be asking?
He proposes what he calls the best question, the one that truly prioritizes real-world scenarios and maximizes your odds of a successful ethical outcome. And it goes like this. This is the bow I'm using. What arrow setup will give me the best chance of making a clean, successful kill on as many of the potential hits as possible when hunting a fill-in-the-blank animal?
Ah, okay. It's not just about the perfect hit, but maximizing success across all potential hits, even the less than ideal ones.
Exactly. It's a mindset shift. It's about building a setup that gives you the best odds, even when things don't go perfectly according to plan. It's about preparedness for reality, not just hoping for the ideal.
That makes so much sense. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Precisely. And the study's concluding advice on this point is just so critical for ethical hunters.
Yeah.
When it comes to hits, try for the best, but prepare for the worst. Because, as Ashby colorfully puts it, a perfect hit is almost as rare as feathers on a frog.
Huh. I like that. It's memorable. It really underscores the need to build in a margin for error to maximize your odds for a clean kill no matter what the shot presents.
That's the core message for practical application.
Okay, so let's quickly recap the big takeaways from this deep dive today. We've covered that crucial heavy bone threshold, needing about 650 grains for reliable initial bone penetration.
That's foundational.
And we've seen why the degree of front of center, especially that ultra EFOC, is absolutely paramount for getting deep post-breaching penetration.
Critical for follow-through.
We saw the surprising fact that the same arrow could be tuned to vastly different bows, highlighting the importance of bow geometry.
Yeah, the tuning aspect was fascinating.
And maybe most importantly, we've really dug into why it's so vital to look beyond potentially misleading metrics like kinetic energy and instead focus on momentum and the entire integrated system of your arrow setup.
It's the whole package that matters.
This isn't just abstract physics, it's data-driven knowledge directly aimed at real-world hunting success and ethics.
Absolutely. Which leads us nicely, I think, to a provocative thought, maybe a challenge for you, our listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
Based on everything we've explored today, all this hard data from Dr. Ashby's real-world testing, how does your current arrow setup actually measure up? Are you genuinely preparing for the worst possible hit scenario? Are you maximizing your chances for an ethical kill, even if that shot hits bone or is slightly off? Or maybe subconsciously, are you just hoping for the best, relying on that perfect shot?
That's a tough question to ask yourself, honestly.
It is, but it's crucial. This knowledge isn't just about numbers on a page. It's fundamentally about increasing your real probability of success in the field and ensuring the most humane outcome possible every single time you release an arrow.
Well said. It really puts the responsibility on the hunter to build the most effective system possible. Folks, if your brain isn't already spinning with ideas about arrow weights and FOC, just you wait. Part 5 of Dr. Ashby's update, which we'll definitely have to dive into another time.
I got to do that one.
It promises to compare this 655-grain Ultra EOOC arrow we discussed today to what he calls super heavy classic buffalo arrows. Apparently, the results are going to be, quote, astonishing.
Can't wait to unpack that one. It should be really eye-opening.
Me too. So, something to look forward to.
Definitely.
All right, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us, for thinking through this complex stuff with us. Keep asking those questions, keep exploring the details, and keep learning.
Yeah, stay curious.
We'll be back soon with more crucial insights. Thanks for listening.